This is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution. God have mercy on you.
Can I please have my mom before I go? Just love my mom.
Please hold on.
I love you. I love you.
Controversially, the jury was shown Colleen's skull with its missing fragment.
Somebody's life, somebody's child away, and somebody's friend, somebody's sister. Hurt so many people with this, and even though it's not me, and I can't take full responsibility for this anymore, and I won't, because if I'm gonna die in here, I'm gonna die for my truth, not for my life.
In January of 1995, a 19-year-old girl was led to a quiet spot near a college campus and held there for the better part of an hour. She was beaten, she was cut, and at some point during it, a pentagram was carved into her body. Then she was killed, with a slab of pavement picked up off the ground nearby. That is not the part of this case people still can't explain. What they can't explain is what her killer did next. She took a piece of the girl's skull and carried it around in her pocket, like a keepsake. That is where this case actually starts. Not with a body, not with a crime scene, but with what came after one. Because the detail that broke this case open, and the detail that still defines it 30 years later, is not that a 19-year-old girl was killed. It is that the person who killed her kept a piece of her afterward and talked about it like it was nothing. 30 years later, and at the time of this video's production, this September, the state of Tennessee is scheduled to execute her. That date is the reason this case is back. A headline from 1995, pulled forward into 2026, but an execution is only ever the last page of something. To understand what this one is actually for, you have to go back to a training campus in Knoxville and to a young woman named Colleen Slemmer. In January of 1995, 18-year-old Christa Gail Pike and 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer were enrolled in the same federal JobCore program in Knoxville, Tennessee, a vocational training initiative for young adults without many other options, meant to put them onto a path toward a trade and a steady income. Colleen Slemmer was one of them, a young woman trying to build something for herself, in a program that existed for exactly that reason. She is the center of this, the person the rest of it happened to. It gets easy to lose her in what follows. So keep her there. Pike and Slemmer knew each other through the program. So did Tatterall Shipp, Pike's boyfriend at the time, and, according to the record, a juvenile himself. And a fourth student, Shadala Peterson. 4 young people, 1 training campus, and at the center of it, a relationship Pike reportedly believed was under threat. Prosecutors argued that jealousy over Shipp was part of what drove Pike toward Slemmer, and that much isn't in dispute. What sets this apart from an ordinary jealousy killing is what was reportedly present alongside it. Pike and Shipp are described, in court testimony and in reporting, as having an interest in Satanism and the occult, something that surfaces through the case not as an afterthought, but as part of how the killing itself was carried out. One thing has to be precise, because it's often gotten wrong. This was not a group, no coven, no organization, no congregation, no network of believers who planned it together. It was 2 teenagers and a set of beliefs between them, one of them acting on the jealousy and the belief at the same time. Occult? Yes. Cult? No. And that distinction doesn't soften anything. If anything, it makes the picture stranger. This wasn't a ritual carried out by a following. It was a girl and her boyfriend, alone, using a symbol they believed in to mark a killing that jealousy had already set in motion. The belief didn't replace the motive. It rode alongside it, revenge and ritual in the same act. What happened next was not a sudden eruption. According to the record, Pike had spoken beforehand about wanting to harm Slemmer, and on the night itself, she lured her away from the JobCore campus under a pretext, reportedly to talk things through somewhere no one else could see or hear. That one choice, the luring, is what separates this from a fight that went too far. It's why a jury would later convict on first-degree murder rather than something lesser. A plan needs a setup, and this one had it. Slemmer was walked to a secluded spot near the University of Tennessee campus. What followed, according to trial testimony, lasted somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour. She was beaten and cut with edged weapons. Accounts describe something like a box cutter alongside a smaller blade, though which weapon did what still varies between sources. At some point during the attack, a pentagram was carved into her body. Where exactly, the chest, the forehead, or both, depends on the account. What every version agrees on is the symbol itself, and that it was cut into her deliberately during the attack, not marked on afterward. Testimony describes Slemmer being toyed with as it went on, at points allowed to believe she might be let go, and then finding out she wasn't. Pike and Shipp are named as the two who carried out the attack. Peterson is the lookout. The blow that killed her came when her skull was struck with a piece of asphalt from the ground nearby. Ordinary pavement in an ordinary place turned into a murder weapon because it happened to be there. Laid out in order, the sequence is its own kind of evidence, a pretext to get her alone, a location chosen in advance. 30 minutes to an hour of sustained violence. Not seconds of panic. A symbol cut into her deliberately in the middle of it. Moments where she may have believed it was ending, and it wasn't. And a killing finished with whatever was on the ground. Because by then, the plan had already done its work. Each of those was a separate piece a jury would weigh. And together, they are why this became first-degree murder rather than something lesser. Planning doesn't always look like a written plan. Sometimes it looks like a pretext, a chosen spot, and enough time spent on the act that no one could ever call it sudden. And then the detail that makes this case what it is. Pike took a piece of Colleen Slemmer's skull from the scene. She kept it, reportedly in a jacket pocket, and over the following days, she carried it back onto the JobCore campus and showed it to people. She talked about the killing, not in an interrogation room, not under pressure, but casually. To people she knew, in the ordinary hallways of the same program, Slemmer had been trying to build a future through, the girl who had been killed for supposedly threatening a relationship, reduced to a fragment in a pocket and a story told between classes. That is the object this case turns on, and practically, it's what ended it. The bragging drew attention. Someone talked. The fragment was recovered as evidence, and Pike was arrested, in custody. Pike gave police a recorded confession, reportedly detailed, and reportedly given without much visible remorse, though the recording itself would have to be in hand before that demeanor is stated as fact. What can be said is that it exists, and that it is the single most direct piece of evidence tying her to a planned, ritualized killing rather than an argument that spiraled out of control. If it can be sourced and cleared, it is the anchor of the whole story. So the case turns here, at the fragment and the confession together. Up to this point, it reads like an extreme version of a familiar story: jealousy, a rival, a fight that went too far. The fragment breaks that story apart. This wasn't a moment that got out of hand and was regretted the instant after. It was a killing that included, as part of it, taking a piece of the victim to keep, planned beforehand, marked with a symbol during, commemorated after. That is a different category of crime, and it's why this one has stayed in circulation for 30 years, when so many killings of similar age and circumstance have not. In 1996, Pike was tried in Knox County and convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy. She was sentenced to death. By most accounts, the youngest woman on death row in the United States at the time. And she remains the only woman on Tennessee's death row today. Shipp was convicted separately and sentenced to life. As a juvenile at the time of the killing, he wasn't eligible for the death penalty. Peterson, according to reporting, received probation in exchange for her testimony. In 2001, while already on death row, Pike was convicted of trying to kill a fellow inmate, a separate case standing on its own record. What followed was 3 decades of appeals, state and federal, all ultimately unsuccessful, and clemency efforts that didn't change the outcome. 30 years is long enough that most people who read a headline about this case today weren't alive when the killing happened. It has outlived the news cycle that first covered it, surfacing each time an appeal fails and receding again. Tennessee paused executions, for a period over questions about its lethal injection protocol, then resumed them in 2025. And that is what brings the case to now, because the appeals have run out, and Christa Pike's execution is scheduled for this September. So here's what is actually known. In January of 1995, Christa Pike lured Colleen Slemmer away from a shared training program under a pretext, and, with 2 accomplices, carried out a planned and prolonged attack that included carving a symbol into her body before killing her with a piece of pavement. Pike took a piece of Slemmer's skull afterward and kept it. She was convicted in 1996, sentenced to death, and has spent 30 years on Tennessee's death row as its only woman. Here is what is reported rather than settled. The exact sequence of the attack, which weapon did what, precisely where the pentagram was carved, and what Pike said in that recorded confession, and how she said it. Those vary across the sources closest to the case, and they stay attributed, not fixed. And here is what still doesn't resolve. Even with a conviction that has stood for 30 years and an execution now weeks away, not guilt. A jury settled that a long time ago. What doesn't resolve is what it means that a killing this deliberate, marked with a symbol in the middle of it, ended with the person who committed it carrying a piece of the victim in her pocket and telling it like a story worth repeating. The execution this September closes a legal process that has run for 3 decades. It does not explain that part. It never really could. She kept it. That is where this case started. 30 years and 1 whole legal lifetime ago. And when the state of Tennessee finally carries out the sentence this September, that is still the detail no one has been able to explain away.